Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is Sierra from Sierra T Designs, and today I'm going to do a quick unboxing of the May kit, and then we'll jump into making the 5 cards. So let's take a quick look at what comes in the kit in case you've forgotten. I know I don't remember completely. Apparently there is a fine clear Says Stamp embossing powder, which is great. I really enjoy their embossing powders. That's always a good thing. We'll just pull the bag out here. I'm pretty sure this one is the one that comes with that really great mini ink cube holder. So that will be super exciting. So let me just pull out the items. All right. So of course we've got a candy like always. Can't ever go wrong with a piece of candy. And then we do have 4 of the ink cubes in the Says Stamp Positively Saturated Inks. I don't actually think I own any of these colors, so that's pretty great. I'm always excited to try out inks. And then of course another one of these teal blending brushes. I have a whole bunch of these now. It's kind of funny. And this is the thing that I'm really excited about. I love storage options and anything that really holds ink cubes or anything like that. So this is really neat. So let's pull this out so I can take a look at it. So it does come with its own little zipper mesh bag, which is really neat. And then it is the teal one. I think you can also get this in gray, but isn't that cool? So like the little ink cube sits in there and you can put the lid and then you can blend or whatever you want to do with it. So I think this is really neat. So we'll have to use that in these cards. So that's pretty cool. And then of course we have an envelope. I believe this is doll pink. It's a metallic doll pink envelope. And then of course there's your card, except this expires, oh, not for another little bit. So if you need to use the 5 off coupon, there you go, you can. And then we get into some pattern papers here. This is beautiful. Oh, it's got a metallic in the background, so that's pretty cool. I think they're double-sided. Yeah, they are double-sided. So we'll take a quick look at the patterns. So one obviously has like a cool metallic sheen to it, and then the other side is like a plainer pattern. Oh, that's really cool. Look at that with that gold. That's stunning. And then you kind of have a more subdued pattern on the background. So that's pretty neat. I always love the pattern papers. They're always stunning. And this is the month's stamp set. So it is the brushed flowers stamp set. And of course it has lots of great sentiments from it. And then these kind of watercolored, subtle flowers. I really like this. This is a very whimsical style. So that's really neat. So we'll have a lot of fun playing with that. And then of course you're going to get the idea sheet that comes in all of the kits, which is pretty neat, and then the cardstock. So I believe we have, let's see, we have a doll pink, black, and I think this is Neenah 110 Solar White. So there are the 3 paper colors. So let's jump right into making the 5 cards. All right, so we're going to jump straight into the first card. So for the first card, I kind of wanted to do a bit of a watercolor effect with this. So I started out by using that little ink holder, but I found that every time I tried to ink up the stamp, the little holder, the ink just fell out of it anyway. So in the end, I stopped using that little ink holder, but it's super neat. I'll try again later to use it, but it didn't work for what I was trying to do here. But I am going to use the inks on each stamp, and I have blocks for this just because I found this to be way easier. And I had ink everywhere. I was dropping these little cubes. My cat got in the way. Like, I was just having so much fun. And then I spray them. So this is a piece of Distress watercolor cardstock that I'm stamping on. And I do use my stamp chamois to clean off the stamp in between each stamping. And I've got the 4 inks there because they are water reactive. I kind of was playing with some water and stamping them down. Now, really, I'm just creating my own pattern paper. That's what this is. You don't have to add water. This is just because I wanted to see what these inks would do. But by all means, you can do this however you'd like to do it. I just thought it would be kind of fun to have a bit of a watercolor look. And I'm not going to show you the whole background. I promise that everything I do is the exact same. I would just pick one of the 4 colors, put it on a block, stamp it, mist it with some water, or sorry, I'd mist it with some water, and then I would stamp it. And I kind of tried to get a really good amount of different color throughout the whole panel so that I didn't have, you know, a whole bunch of pink together or a whole bunch of yellow or whatever. And in some of them I did do double stamping like I just did there with the leaf. So I kind of just went back and forth between the 4 colors, just kind of trying to create my own version of a pattern paper that would have this kind of watercolor effect. And I think these stamps are perfect for it. And anywhere where the water kind of made the stamp hard to read, if that makes sense. I stamped it twice. So here you can see that there is actually a center detail to that stamp, but because there was so much water making the ink move, you kind of lost that center. So I did end up just stamping it down again. So there's a lot of differentiation, even though that they're kind of the same stamps, really just being used over and over. But I am going to jump away from this now so you guys kind of get the idea. And then we're going to move into filling in the little bit of space that was left. So here you can see I'm pretty well happy with what I've kind of created. And there's these two little dots that come in this stamp set. And I wanted to kind of use them to fill in the little bit of space. So I did use each of the colors, and you saw me kind of ink up the little circle, and then I do first and second generation stamping. No water in this one because I wanted it to be a little bit more, not solid necessarily, but a little less washed out, I guess. And I just inked up both of the little circles, and then I would kind of stamp it down twice in whatever area I felt needed a little bit more of the color. And in some areas I just overlapped them. And then, of course, I used my stamp chamois just to clean them off in between because it was easier than like trying to wipe them. I mean, I use baby wipes sometimes, but I mean, it kind of just really depends on what you want to do. And then for when I started to make the card, I really wanted there to be a little bit of area that you didn't have to kind of, there was no pattern, if that makes sense. So I cut off about an inch, I think. It's about that. You guys know that I like to eyeball things. And then I brought in a piece of black cardstock because I wanted to kind of just give it a little differentiation between where the pattern paper ended and where the base cardstock was going to be. This is honestly just a little extra. You don't necessarily need it. I just kind of like that it differentiates the two areas and it gives it a little bit of height, a little bit of dimension. So, I mean, by all means, some of the things that I do are a little bit extra. You don't need to do that step, but I like how it looks, so I do tend to go that way. And then I added some Nuvo Deluxe glue just to adhere it down to that little black. I'm going to call it a matte. Oh, I guess it is a matte, but I'm only going to have the black showing on the bottom of the little panel there. And anytime I need something to adhere and I'm worried it's not going to, I do put my Misty on top of it. So I do that quite a few times throughout this video because we are making 5 cards. But I did kind of like that little bit of a gap there with the black. And then I'm also going to stamp my sentiment in black. So I think that that really helps the two go together. There's not much black in this design. So had I brought in just the sentiment in black, I think it would have been a little more eye-catching than I wanted it to be, and I really want your focus to be on this super vibrant watercolored pattern paper. So that's kind of my thought process with this card. So here you're going to see I'm going to bring in an acrylic block with the thank you stamp from the stamp set, and I'm going to stamp it down in some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And just kind of to the right-hand corner, the bottom there, it's kind of my preferred place to put stuff. I don't know. I like to work from the top left corner to the bottom right corner. That's just kind of how I always do, but I don't think there's any wrong place to put it. That's just where I end up doing stuff. And then I did bring in some Pink Fresh Glacier jewels to just finish off the card. They're clear. They're not going to pull a whole bunch of focus, but in the light, they just take a little bit. And of course, I had to put that little piece that was left after I trimmed it off in the inside so that I didn't have to waste it. So that is the first card. I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. I think that it's really pretty, and it was one of the first cards I came up with when I first saw the stamp set. So I think that it really worked out and looked really pretty. And then we're going to jump straight into the second card. So for the second card, I made a mini slimline card. So for me, as a general rule, I like my mini slimlines to be 6 inches by 6 inches. So that's what I cut my base cardstock to be, which is what you see me doing here. And then I like to score at the 3-inch mark. So you've got a 6-inch by 3-inch mini slimline once it is scored and closed. But I've seen so many. I've seen different sizes for this. There's no wrong way. This is just my preferred way to do it. So this is how I do it. But by all means, do whatever size that works for you. This is just kind of what I prefer. And then I brought in this really pretty piece of pattern paper from the kit, and I used my decollage trimmer to trim it down into my panel size. If you guys have been with me for a minute, you know that I struggle a bit with pattern paper. I have a tendency to want to make my own. I want to make my own backgrounds. I want to do all the coloring and all the things. So pattern paper to me always kind of throws me off a bit. So with these kits, I've been really trying to challenge myself to use the pattern paper and kind of come up with card designs that you can make with them. So it's always a bit of a struggle for me. I always try to make 1 or 2 each time I do a kit. So this is the first I will do two pattern paper cards in this, but this was the first one. So I kind of just trimmed it down to be about 1/8 of an inch smaller than my card base. And then for my sentiment, this is again a stamp from the stamp set, and I'm just going to white heat emboss it on vellum. Now there is embossing powder in the kit, but it is clear, and I didn't want to do clear on vellum. That would have been hard to see. So I did bring in some white embossing powder. This is just my preferred white embossing powder. It's Brutus Monroe's Alabaster White. And then I just coated that with the white embossing powder, and then I'm going to heat set it. And with vellum especially, although I pretty much always do, I like to preheat my embossing tool. I find that that's going to give you a better emboss because it's going to get less warping. And with vellum, you have to be careful because this is thick vellum. This is meant to be heat embossed, but I don't want it to warp, right? So I always preheat my embossing tool for 15 seconds or so, and then I bring it to the vellum and actually use it. So just a thought there, if you ever have any problems with anything that you're embossing warping, this is kind of a way to stop that from happening. And then I did bring in my nested circle dies. I just grabbed a circle that fit around that sentiment, and I'm going to run it through my Gemini. And I am going to cut the vellum twice. I decided that I wanted my vellum to be a little bit thicker than what I have here. And sadly, it wouldn't fit in my Xyron sticker maker. I have a Xyron. It's just one of the really small ones. And sadly, my little circle would not fit through there. So I had to kind of come up with my own way to adhere these together. Now, you can see it a little bit. This maybe wasn't the perfect way to do this, but honestly, I think that you notice it because I'm showing it to you. And if you receive the card, you might not necessarily notice it. So I did put a little bit of Nuvo Deluxe glue on these pieces of vellum that I'm going to layer up. And then I just rub my finger along it to kind of get rid of any lines and smooth it out a bit. It's not perfect, but I think that it works for what I'm after here. I mean, there are other ways, of course, like the Xyron sticker maker would have made it easier. However, the circle didn't fit in the one that I own, and I'm not going to go buy one just so I can put some adhesive on this specific piece here. But so I don't really think you can tell, but that's just kind of my trick to it. And then I really wanted to add something extra. So in this case, I brought in just some white thread I have. I kind of wish my thread was a little bit thicker, just because it would have given it a little bit more, but this is what I have. So again, I'm going to use what I have. And I brought in some 1/4 inch score tape. This is just so I can adhere it to the back. You could, of course, adhere it into have it tie into a bow in the front. I didn't do that in this instance, but you could. And then I just kind of wrapped it around, making sure that every round touches that score tape in the back. And I'm just going around, there's no rhyme or reason. I didn't know how many times I'd end up going around. It was just really up to how much string I had there, or thread. And then I do add a little piece of the same score tape on the top, just to make sure that that thread doesn't go anywhere, so it can't let go and kind of loosen. So I just kind of adhered it there. And then I kind of eyeballed where I wanted my sentiment to go, because I wasn't totally sure. But I did bring in my Big Mama foam tape. This stuff is amazing. I'm like crazy in love with it. I'm going to use it on a few cards in this video, but it's not very thick. I know it's called Big Mama, but it's only called Big Mama because the roll is so big, not because of the thickness of the foam tape. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. It's actually very thin. It's thinner than the 3M foam tape. So it is very, very thin. So it adds a little bit of dimension, but not a crazy amount of bulk, which for me, as a person who does mail their cards, I try not to have too much bulk on stuff that I plan to send out. So it's kind of my way of getting dimension without a crazy amount of thickness to it. So, and I usually bring in my reverse tweezers to remove any of the tape. I just find that easier. You can, of course, if you can use your fingernails, whatever you have, but I like the reverse tweezers. And the other thing about this Big Mama foam tape is that it's very forgiving. So if you adhere it down and it wasn't straight, you saw there that I didn't have it quite where I wanted it. I was able to lift it up because I hadn't pressed it down yet. So it does give you a fair amount of time to manipulate it if you need that time, which Usually I do, which is kind of why I tend towards liquid glue, just because it gives me that little bit of time to shift things around. But by all means, use what you have or use what you prefer. I like dimension in my cards, so I do have a tendency towards that. And then I did bring in just this piece of pattern paper. This is just a butterfly that I trimmed out of the pattern paper. I'm going to fussy cut it out, as you can see here, and then I'm going to adhere it next to the sentiment. Just something a little bit extra to put on the card. Not necessary, but I like to add things, so I tend to. And then here I just put a little bit more of that Nuvo Deluxe glue on the back, and I just wiped it around with my finger. You could use a brush if you don't want to touch the glue. I don't mind. I don't mind using my finger for things, but I know some people don't enjoy that. And then I just adhered it down on top of the string to the bottom right hand side again. Again, see, I prefer that side. That's just kind of how I roll. And then I added a little glue to my butterfly and then promptly dropped it, but that was okay because it didn't need that much glue anyway, so not a big deal. And then I brought in an acrylic block to weigh it down. And then once it was kind of adhered, I brought in my fingers and I'm just going to manipulate the wings so that they sit up for some added dimension. But of course, once you put that in an envelope, it would be flat. So that's just kind of a way to add dimension that's not really going to hinder the envelope at all. And then I brought in a Spectrum Noir glitter pen so that I could add some shimmers to the butterfly wings. Again, because you can never have enough shiny things, in my opinion. And I brought in them same Glacier jewels. I think that I used the Glacier jewels actually on all of the cards that I add jewels to. So I believe it's just the first 3 cards actually. And then I'm going to hold it up here so you can check it out in all of its glory. I think that it turned out really pretty. I like how it turned out for a card that I struggled with a bit because it's pattern paper and that's not a forte of mine. I think that it still turned out really pretty. So I would love to know what you guys think. If you want to leave me a comment about, well, I'm hoping you'll tell me which card is your favorite, but totally up to you. And then we're going to jump into the third card. So for the third card, I am once again going to make a mini slimline card. I tend towards mini slimlines and A2 sizes. Those are kind of the preferred sizes I like to work in. And I'm going to bring in those Simon inks again. Now the mini cubes were specific to this kit, so you won't be able to actually purchase the mini cubes unless you got the kit, of course. So I have the full-sized ones linked in the description if you're interested in any of the. I always have all of the products linked and listed down below if you're ever interested, but you'll notice that you can't get those mini ink cubes unless Simon brings them out in a future release, which they probably will, I assume. But they were exclusive to this kit, so at this time you cannot purchase them. But just so if anybody's wondering why I don't have the cubes linked, that is why. And I did create a black mat for this. And for this one, I brought in the mini ink, or sorry, the mini, or the small blending brushes. And I have several. Simon's been putting them in their kits for a while, so I have quite a few of them. Now, I really wanted to create a blend between the colors. I wanted to see how they would react. If you guys have been with me for a minute, you know that I love blending. Ink blending is one of my favorite techniques. So I really wanted to see what would happen. And I did choose to use the brush because there was one in this kit. And because I've been getting the kits for a while, I have several of these brushes. So I just grabbed a bunch that I hadn't used. I do kind of wish that I had used my dome foams instead. I find those way easier to blend with personally, but this worked until I got frustrated that it wasn't putting ink down fast enough for me. So I'm going to end up just swiping it across the cardstock. This is just because I got impatient, not because it wasn't working necessarily. It's just that I wanted more color and it wasn't doing it quick enough for me. So I ended up just kind of swiping it and then kind of trying to blend it out a bit with the brushes. So I ended up kind of using both. These colors are very, I mean, I know they're called saturated, but they're very juicy. The ink cubes, like, they're very, very juicy. I had ink all over the place while playing with these inks, but I had a lot of fun and it was a really interesting learning curve because I don't really own any other than what has come in the kits. So it was kind of fun to play with. And then of course, once it was dry, I had to splash on some Perfect Pearls that I just have mixed up in a mini mister bottle. And I think that turned out really pretty. And I did overlap the colors to get some variation. So like the pink and the yellow made orange. And then the blue and the green kind of made a more tealy aqua color, stuff like that. And then at the bottom, I did end up putting a little pink over the blue just to get a purple. And then I brought in a sentiment from that same stamp set. And I brought in my Misty for this because I knew it wasn't going to stamp well the first time. This was the first time I'd used any of these stamps. And I do find solid stamps don't stamp great the first few times you use them, especially sentiments, for whatever reason, for me specifically. So I did use my Misty for that part, and I did stamp it down a couple of times. And then I did use the clear embossing powder that came in the kit to give this sentiment this cool shine. You can kind of see her on the when I tip it sideways, and I fussy cut it out. There are matching dies for this kit, but of course I don't own them because they came out after the kit did. And now I know I'm a bit late with this video, but things have been just crazy, and you know, it's hard to catch up sometimes, but I did want to get this video out as quickly as I could so that you guys could check this out, and hopefully you have your kit ready and you can kind of play with the items in this kit and have some fun like I did. But I did fussy cut this out with my scissors. I don't have any issues fussy cutting, but as I said, there is a die set and it does cut this sentiment out, so you could absolutely do that if you preferred. And then I brought in my liquid glue, and I'm just going to adhere this down to that black matte. Again, that black matte just kind of helps those colors pop, and it also ties into my sentiment. I knew that I wanted my sentiment to be black, so this black matte really helps that, so that the sentiment's not the only thing that is black. And I did bring in my Big Mama foam tape for this as well, so I coated the back of my sentiment with it so that it would be popped up a little bit, and then I'm also going to add it to the back of the black matte so that it is also popped up just a little bit. Just for a little added dimension. I like dimension. That's one of my favorite things, just to kind of create layers, but you don't need to. It could have been flat and that would have been perfectly fine. So here you go is when I've just finished coating the back of this, and then I'm going to remove all of the release paper, again with my tweezers because I find it easier, but there's no right or wrong way to do any of these steps. And then I'm going to kind of line it up on my base. And my layers are pretty much always 1/8 of an inch. That's kind of my aim. So my black matte would be 1/8 of an inch smaller than my white base, and then my colored panel, which was HammerMill, by the way, is 1/8 of an inch smaller than my black matte. And that's just kind of my preferred. And in this case, I actually put the sentiment to the kind of center top of the card. So I kind of went away from my whole lower right corner, although I don't know that it would have looked as good in this design, but again, there's no wrong way to do it, so there you go. And I did add some of those glacier jewels to this card as well, just again because you can never have enough shimmer and shine in my opinion, so I did add them to this card as well. And that's the last card I add them to, actually, so you won't see them again now. But we are going to make a flat shaker card after this one, which, if you have watched my videos for a while, you know how much I love making flat shaker cards, and I try to bring them in every once in a while just for entertainment value. So this will be an A2 sized card, and I will use some pattern paper for this. So I did cut down a black matte that will be an 1/8 of an inch smaller than my A2 base, because again, that is my preferred layering size. I just like to have like a slight amount of the color pop out. That's kind of just what I like to do. And I didn't use the colored paper out of the kit. I should have probably, but I didn't. I pretty much went white and black for all of the card bases and the layers. That's just what I like to do, but there's no wrong way to do it. And then I cut this piece of pattern paper out to be, again, that 1/8 of an inch smaller than the black matte, so that you kind of have these layers. And I really liked this kind of monochromatic look here, because the piece we put on top is going to be quite colorful. And I thought that would be a really nice contrast. So we're going to use this kind of, I guess it's like a collage piece of pattern paper. It just has several different images on it. And I really wanted that floral. And I tried to make the butterfly work as well, but in the end, it just didn't work in the design I was going for. So I ended up just adhering it on the inside of the card, but this is kind of what I was hoping for. So I did fussy cut this image out again. I like fussy cutting, and it's one of the easier ways for me to use pattern paper is to just kind of fussy cut out some images and then adhere them onto things. It's kind of one way that really works for me. So I fussy cut around this image, and I did leave that cool white and black stripey bit in the back there. I thought that was really neat. And I like that this has different colors behind it. I thought it was just a really fun pattern paper, and I really wanted to try to use it. So this is what I came up with for this. And of course, we are going to create a flat shaker card with it. So we need to create that. So I brought in a piece of packaging. I don't even know what was in this I honestly have no idea. And I just kind of measured out my piece that I wanted to create into that flat shaker card. And I do like to use my trimmer for this. I just find that I get a better, more consistent line. You don't have to. I've used scissors in the past. I just find this to be a smidge easier. And like it makes really tiny cuts as I just showed you there. But there's no right or wrong way to do. I like to use it. And it's always on my desk because I make a lot of cards. So. And then here I'm just going to use some score tape to hold my pocket closed. I find score tape to be the best way to adhere them. Of course, there are companies that make really cool shaker pockets. I've used some of those in the past as well. This is just a really cool way to use up all that packaging that we get with stamps and whatnot. So this is kind of a neat way to recycle that material into something that doesn't just go in the trash. And so I keep it all in a drawer together. And then when I want to make a flat shaker, I pull out a piece and trim it down, and then I'm good to go, and very little ends up getting wasted. So I have started doing each side individually. You don't have to do this. This is just a way that I've found kind of works better for me. So I would put a piece of score tape down, and then I would adhere that one side, and then the bottom corners would overlap. Now you can trim the corners off before you adhere them down. I don't, simply because I'm always worried that I'm going to cut it too short and glitter is going to fall out. So I don't like to do that. I like to trim them afterwards. But there's no wrong way to do it. So you do whatever works for you. And then I have Distress Mica flakes and Distress Rock Candy glitter. They're my favorite thing to put in shaker cards because they don't seem to have any static to them. I have found a lot of glitter has a lot of static to it, and because I live in northern Canada where it's fairly dry, I do have issues with things and static and sticking to things. So I prefer this just because it seems to not stick to my plastic as much as some other products that I've tried to use. So no wrong way, just put whatever you want in your shaker pouch. I mean, I also like this because it was very neutral. So again, the biggest pop of color is going to be the flower I'm going to put on top. And then here you see I just trimmed off the little bit of plastic that kind of gets stuck in the corners. And then I just shook it up so you could check out that cool shake. And then we're going to adhere it down to my mat. So I did bring in another score tape. This is just slightly thicker. I think this is like a, what did I use? I think I used like 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch score tape. That's what I ended up using for this. I mean, any size will do. I just find this is the easiest way to get the shaky bits to stay in the panel. And liquid glue doesn't always work great on plastic. I mean, you can get it to work. I shouldn't say that. I have, and I'm going to right here. But I did set my MISTI on top of this piece to make sure that it couldn't move once I had adhered it down, just because I didn't want it to shift. So, I mean, you could have coated this in something else, but I wanted the ability to move it around. So again, I used my liquid glue. There's no wrong way, though. I mean, whatever you have, will work perfect. But here you see I did weight it down with my MISTI. And then once it was dry, I did trim off any of the bits that were hanging off of my black mat. And then I'm going to adhere it down to the panel. Oh no, I'm not. I lied. I'm going to cut out my sentiment. So this didn't come in the kit, but I love the sentiment strips from Says Stamp. I've gotten them in several kits, and every once in a while I like to bring them in as just a really simple way to, I mean, we didn't stamp in this, we didn't die cut, we didn't do anything. This card is just pattern paper and a label strip. Like, I think that's a pretty neat way to create a card that didn't take a lot of supplies. And I mean, you could recreate this pretty easily as well. You could use any pattern paper. I just kind of used a neutral for the back, and then I used a fun, colorful piece for the front. That's there's not a ton to it, but I think that it turned out really cool and quite pretty, and a neat way to have used the pattern paper as a challenge for myself. So I don't know. I like how it turned out. You guys will have to let me know what you think. I mean, there are some people out there who make amazing pattern paper cards. I just happen not to be one of them. They're just not something I gravitate towards easily. So I always kind of have fun. But yeah, so there. Hopefully you can hear it. I'm just shaking the card for you. But yeah, so there is a really fun shaker card that I created with the pattern papers in the kit. And then for the final, it is a card, I guess. I'm going to make an ATC, an artist trading card. I love to do these. They're really fun to trade to other artists, which is kind of my whole thing with them. And it's going to be quite simple, and you could absolutely have done this as a card instead. I just try to make different sized things so that I can kind of play with the materials in different ways. So this is an artist trading card, which is 2.5 by 3.5 inches. That is the only rule to an artist trading card. Literally, there is no other rule to it. You just make sure that it's that size, then you can do whatever you want. So I brought in those ink cubes again, and I just swiped them across the card, and it will dry back a little bit. Here it's very vibrant, but it will dry back a little bit once we get there. And I did try to test my embossing powder here. This is the clear embossing powder that came in the kit, and I wanted to heat emboss on it, but it feels dry, but I wasn't sure, and it's not dry at all. So it's a good thing that I did that little test, and then I just wiped it off with a flat brush. And then I'm going to bring in my heat tool, my Ranger heat tool, and just blast it for a little bit here, just to make sure that my embossing powder does not stick where I don't want it. This is just a lazy man's way to do it. I could have set this aside, walked away, and then come back, and it probably would have been fine, but usually when I'm making these videos, I kind of am trying to get them out fairly quickly. So I'm impatient and I want everything to be ready now. So it's a good thing that I checked, because now I'm going to check again to make sure. And you can see that the embossing powder just falls off, no problem. So now I know that I can heat emboss it with no issues. And I do, of course, again, bring in my anti-static powder tool, just because I don't want embossing powder where it doesn't belong. And I brought in 2 of the stamps that I had used originally in my first card, just this kind of flower part, and I'm just going to kind of stamp it down in my black. This is my VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And then I also brought in the stamp that's the stem that I really liked, and I'm just going to line them up. I did this with an acrylic block. You don't need to. You could absolutely use your Misty for this, but this was easier for me at the time. And then I'm going to coat them in that clear embossing powder so that it gives this really cool shiny black effect once I actually heat set it. I like the look. I like clear embossing powder. I don't know why I don't use it very often, but I like how it looks with black because it just gives that really pretty shine, which you can kind of see here as I hold it up. And then I had to flick on some perfect pearls. You don't need to do this step. This is extra. I mean, most steps I do are extra, but you don't need to add the perfect pearls on this. I think it was pretty before I added it as well, but I just thought for something extra I'd add a little shimmer in the background. And then I decided to edge the card as well in that black ink. You don't need to do this either. Or if you wanted to, alternatively, you could trim it all down a smidge and just add a black MAC behind it. So that's another option that you could do if you didn't want to edge it the way I just did. But yeah, so those are the 5 cards I have with the May card kit. I would love to know what you guys think. Did you like them? Do you have a favorite? Would you recreate any of them? I'd love to know. And I'd hope you consider subscribing if you haven't already. I do new videos every Monday and Thursday, and then sometimes in between too, depending on what's going on. So thank you so much, guys, and I will see you again very soon. Bye-bye for now.